The rain poured relentlessly against the towering glass facade of Kingston International, a relentless curtain of water blurring the city skyline. From the 52nd floor, the streets below looked like veins of silver, weaving through a sleeping beast of steel and concrete. Inside the penthouse office, Ethan Kingston, CEO of one of the most powerful conglomerates in the country, paced back and forth like a man trapped inside his own mind. His tailored suit was immaculate, but the lines etched into his face betrayed nights without sleep. His gaze kept drifting to the leather couch in the corner, to the small figure sitting there. A girl, no more than 10, clutching a weathered stuffed rabbit. Her hair was the pale gold of autumn wheat, but damp from the storm outside. She sat perfectly still, her wide green eyes tracking every movement in the room like a silent witness. She had not spoken a single word in 2 years. Her name was Lila Kingston, Ethan's daughter, his only child. Once, she had been laughter itself, a whirlwind of chatter and giggles. But 2 years ago, on a cold February night, a drunk driver's headlights had shattered their world. Lila had been in the back seat when the car skidded on black ice. Her mother's scream was the last sound she had heard before everything went dark. When she woke in the hospital, her voice was gone. Not physically, the doctors said her vocal cords were fine, but emotionally, psychologically, she was locked inside herself. The shock had stolen her words and buried them somewhere deep. Ethan had spent millions trying to bring them back. Specialists from Europe, child psychologists from Japan, speech therapists from New York, every name at the top of their field had walked into this office and walked out defeated. They had tried toys, pictures, music therapy, animal therapy, even hypnotherapy. Each time, Lila would watch them with polite curiosity, but the wall inside her never cracked. Now, Ethan stood at the end of his rope. His board of directors whispered about his obsession. His ex-wife's wealthy parents threatened to petition for custody, claiming he couldn't care for her properly. Every day, the pressure grew heavier. But none of that mattered as much as the silence. The silence of the little girl who used to run into his arms after work, babbling about her day. The silence of the bedtime stories she no longer asked for. The silence of her grief, and his helplessness to fix it. He turned abruptly toward the group of experts gathered in his office one last time. His voice, when it came, was raw. Greater than, if you teach her to speak again, Ethan said, each word deliberate, I'll give you everything. My fortune, my company, my penthouse, anything. The specialists exchanged looks. One woman, a speech therapist in a sharp navy suit, shifted uncomfortably. Greater than, Mr. Kingston, some wounds can't be healed with money. Something in Ethan's face darkened. His hand tightened around the edge of his desk. Greater than, then get out, he said quietly. All of you, get out. The group left, their shoes clicking against the marble floor, the door shutting softly behind them. The only sound left was the rain. Ethan sank onto the couch beside Lila. She didn't move away, but she didn't look at him either. Her tiny hands gripped the stuffed rabbit so tightly its seams were fraying. He wanted to tell her he would fix this, that no matter how long it took, he would find the key to unlock her voice again. But the words caught in his throat. That's when the door creaked open. Ethan looked up, expecting to see one of the therapists returning to offer another useless suggestion. But it wasn't a doctor. It wasn't a suit. It was Marcos, the janitor. He was in his mid-50s, with a wiry build and hands that looked like they'd worked a lifetime. His overalls bore fresh paint stains from repairing a wall earlier. His dark eyes, warm, steady, like rich coffee, met Ethan's with quiet resolve. Greater than, sir, Marcos said hesitantly, I heard what you said. About your daughter. Ethan's brow furrowed. This is none of your concern. Marcos nodded once, accepting the rebuke without flinching. Greater than, I know. But, my wife was a children's speech therapist before she passed. I learned a lot from helping her with her cases. I'd like to try. Ethan almost laughed. The janitor, after all the experts failed. Greater than, if you waste my time, Ethan began. Greater than, I won't, Marcos interrupted gently. Without asking permission, Marcos crouched in front of Lila. He didn't speak to her right away. Instead, he slowly reached into his pocket and drew out a small, carved wooden bird. Its wings were painted bright blue, the paint worn from years of touch. Greater than, this is Azulito, Marcos said softly. He's a bird who forgot how to sing. Lila's eyes shifted toward the bird. Her fingers relaxed slightly on the stuffed rabbit. Greater than, but you know what? Marcos continued, his voice low and calm. Azulito isn't broken, he just needed someone to listen. Ethan watched, holding his breath. Lila's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but something close. Marcos didn't push her, he simply set Azulito on the couch beside her. Greater than, I'll be back tomorrow, he said, meeting her gaze briefly. Maybe you can help him sing again. He stood, nodded to Ethan, and left without another word. Ethan stared at the tiny wooden bird in his daughter's lap. Lila's small fingers traced its wings over and over, her eyes soft in a way he hadn't seen in months. For the first time in 2 years, hope flickered in Ethan's chest. The next morning, Ethan arrived at his office early, more from restless insomnia than discipline. The city outside was still wet from the storm, but sunlight was beginning to pierce through the clouds in golden streaks. Lila sat in the same spot on the leather couch, her rabbit in one hand, the little wooden bird in the other. Her fingers traced the blue paint on its wings like she was memorizing every curve. When the elevator dinged, Ethan turned sharply. Marcos stepped in, not carrying cleaning supplies, but a small, battered shoebox. "Good morning," he said, his voice even. Ethan gestured toward his daughter. "She hasn't put that thing down since you left." Marcos's eyes softened. "That's good. It means she's listening, even if she's not ready to speak." He set the shoebox on the coffee table and opened it. Inside were more carved animals, a fox, a turtle, a dog, a little gray mouse. Each one looked worn but loved, the wood smoothed by countless fingers. "They were my wife's," Marcos said. "She used them to help children who had been through things." He didn't finish the sentence, but Ethan understood. Marcos sat cross-legged on the floor, lowering himself to Lila's level. "Azulito told me he dreamed of meeting his friends again," he said, holding up the carved fox. "This is Zora, the fox who's afraid of the dark." Lila blinked but kept silent. She stopped going out at night after she saw something scary, Marcos continued gently. "So now she only watches the stars from her window." Ethan watched, astonished, as Lila's head tilted slightly, just the smallest movement of curiosity. Marcos didn't push her for a response. He simply placed Zora next to Azulito on the couch. The session lasted 15 minutes. Marcos spoke softly, telling tiny stories about each animal, each one with a fear or sadness they were learning to overcome. Lila didn't speak, but by the end, she had lined the animals in a neat little row, something she hadn't done with any therapist's toys before. When Marcos stood to leave, Ethan caught his arm. "You're different from them," he said quietly. Marcos shook his head. "I'm not different, I just..." "Don't try to pull the words out. I let her bring them when she's ready." Over the next week, Marcos came every morning. The carved animals became a little world in Ethan's office. Lila arranged and rearranged them, sometimes letting Marcos tell the stories, sometimes moving them silently to show how the characters were feeling. By the 4th day, she had taken Azulito and Zora home, keeping them beside her bed. By the 7th day, Ethan noticed something that made his chest ache. She smiled. Just a small one, but it was real. Still, no words. Ethan's faith wavered late one evening after work. He found himself in his office, pacing again while Lila played quietly with the turtle and the fox. Marcos was packing up. "I'm starting to think," Ethan hesitated. "Maybe she really won't ever." Marcos straightened. "Don't say that in front of her," he said firmly. "She hears everything. She's just deciding whether the world is safe enough to hear her voice again." Ethan swallowed his pride and nodded. On the 10th day, something changed. Marcos brought a new carving, a small bird with broken wings. "This," he told Lila, "is Paloma. She can't fly anymore because she fell during a storm. Now she's afraid to even open her wings." He set Paloma down next to Azulito. "But," he added softly, "Azulito told her that she's not alone. And that maybe, if she tries, he'll sing for her." Lila's hands froze on the toys. Her lips pressed together. Ethan felt his heart hammering. Something in her face had shifted. Marcos waited, saying nothing. For a long moment, there was only silence. And then, "Sing." It was the faintest whisper, but it sliced through the air like lightning. Ethan's breath caught. His eyes stung before he even realized he was crying. "Yes," Marcos said gently, his smile warm. "Sing." Lila's eyes brimmed with tears, but she didn't look away. Her voice was hoarse from disuse, but she spoke again, a little clearer this time. "Azulito, sing." Ethan dropped to his knees beside her, pulling her into his arms, his voice breaking. "Baby," You spoke. She leaned against him, clutching Azulito tightly. Daddy, she whispered. It was the first time she had called him that in 2 years. The next morning, Ethan called a private meeting. He kept his promise, though Marcos tried to refuse. You said you'd give me everything, Marcos reminded him. But I don't want your company. I don't want your penthouse. I just wanted her to have her voice back. Ethan stared at him. Then tell me what you do want. Marcos hesitated before answering quietly. A scholarship program, for kids like her, ones who've been through things they can't talk about. Funded in my wife's name. That's all. Ethan extended his hand. Done. But you're staying. Not as a janitor. As head of the program. For the first time, Ethan saw Marcos look truly stunned. Months later, the Kingston Children's Recovery Foundation opened its doors. Marcos was there every day, carving new animals and telling new stories. Lila visited often, helping younger kids arrange the toys, her voice growing stronger each week. One afternoon, as she placed Azulito on a shelf, she looked up at Marcos. You knew how it felt to be quiet inside. Marcos nodded slowly. I lost my son in an accident. I didn't speak for a long time either. My wife helped me, the same way I helped you. Lila hugged him without a word. Some things, she realized, didn't need to be said. And in Ethan's heart, one truth remained clear. No amount of money, no boardroom deal, no empire could compare to the sound of his daughter's voice coming back to life. The janitor hadn't just taught her to speak again. He had taught them both how to heal.